We're live. Happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome. My name's Ruby from the Feed Real Institute, and I am here with the lovely Dr. Ruth Roberts, who's joining us from
Bar Montenegro.
I love
And
it.
if you know where that is, you win the prize in geography.
Yes, you do. Speaking of geography, for everyone that's tuning in, drop us a comment and tell us what city you're in. We would love to know. I just love that our lives are becoming like so international, especially with our courses. We have people from all over the world joining, and it's just been such a pleasure having so many people tune in. If you guys have not met or heard of Dr. Ruth before, she is a renowned expert in the field of veterinary medicine. And she's also a speaker at our upcoming Feed Real Summit this October in San Diego. And she's got a wealth of knowledge and experience. She does not only help dog owners and cat owners with some of their ailments through holistic practice, she is also helping aspiring wellness coaches practice in their field so that they can help others. Ruth, thank you so much for being here with us. Honored to have you on our show.
Ruby, always a delight. Thank you. And I'm so flattered to be here as well.
Yes, absolutely. So we're up. I'm so excited for the summit. I was hoping you could sort of shed some light on what you're going to be talking about before we dive into a very big topic of early spay and neuter. But what do you plan on
Yes.
talking about at the summit?
Basically, how you can take your pet's holistic health, and I was so excited, into your own hands, because that's it, right? The medicine, whether it's human medicine, veterinary medicine, the whole deal is I'm the doctor and I know what's best. And no, you are the pet parent and you live with your pet every day, so you do know what's best. And so my goal is to give folks some tips that they can take away and use. We're going to have a really awesome handout called When Not to Go to the ER Vet, and we'll kind of go through some of those things. How to put a first aid kit together, talk about vaccines and titers and all the hot topics, flea and tick meds, I'm an integrative practitioner, and so I'll use prescription medications. But I mean, the stuff that's being pushed onto pets right off the rip as young dogs and cats is scary. So we'll talk about some of those meds and why you don't want to use them.
Yeah, I think I read a statistic not too long ago that there are at least 80 million dogs in the US, but only 80,000 veterinarians who may not even be practicing or handling small animal medicine. And that number is just wild.
So here's what's even worse. So the number is there's 90 million dogs in the US, 60 million cats. There are 76,500 small animal veterinarians, and the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association has 1,500 members. What's worse is that by 2030, the demand for veterinarians will be 55,000 in addition to where we are now, to help compensate for veterinarians that are retiring. And the ability of veterinary schools to produce new veterinarians will fall short of that goal by 25,000. I mean,
Wow.
it is bad. And literally, so the American Animal Hospital Association wrote an article entitled, "If You Think the Veterinary Shortage is Bad Now, ... And then, discuss sort of the basic tips of this, of these studies that Mars Pet Healthcare had done. So, and that's part of the problem too, right? Mars owns 40% of veterinary medicine in the U.S. It's not gonna get better, and
Yeah.
so that's part of the deal. We got to train folks how to understand what to do for themselves, for their pets. But that's part of my goal, as you mentioned, is to train passionate pet pros and pet parents to be holistic pet health coaches, because
Yep.
that's the only way we're going to start to make a dent in this issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you guys haven't gotten your tickets yet for the Feed Real Summit, there are a few left and prices are going up this weekend. So make sure you reserve your spot. You can find them at feedreal.com/summit. It's a killer lineup. Once you go to that website, I am even surprised that we've been able to sort of pull this together, but the amount of support from the community and the leaders in our industry saying, oh, I love this. You want to talk about longevity. You want to talk about practical ways to help dog and cat owners really take care of their animals without just feeling like they have to run to the veterinarian every single time something's wrong. I love that handout that you just mentioned, when not to go to the ER. That is going to save everyone so much time and anxiety. I can't wait for that.
Amen. Amen. And I know I am so honored to be sharing the stage with amazing stars in the veterinary and feeding world. So I'm so psyched to be there and actually meet you live and in person.
Yes, yes. October is going to be a crazy week. A lot of people are coming down for AHVMA. That's the Holistic Veterinary Medical Conference, which is just 1 week prior to our Feed Real Summit. So lots of stuff happening here in San Diego. I hope to meet a lot of our audience who joins into our lives in person as well.
Right on.
All right, so let's jump into early spay and neuter. This is a very controversial topic, highly debated, and unfortunately, it's controversial even though there's the science that tells us why early spay and neuter could potentially be damaging. Where do you stand on that?
Frankly, I'm calling it spay neuter syndrome. And it's a double-edged sword, so don't get me wrong. Like when I started practice in 1990 in Charleston, South Carolina, the local SPCA was taking in 45,000 animals every year, and they were euthanizing 35,000 of them.
Oh my
So
God.
right? So, I mean, as a veterinarian, I'm like, please, 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 and so 90% of my clients, their pets were intact. But there were, I mean, it was terrible. The pet overpopulation problem was just off the hook. And so the ASPCA, the veterinary profession, we all got behind it. Let's get these guys gonadectomized so that they're not making more puppies and kittens that will suffer. So we're so proud of ourselves. And then, oh golly, about 2000, I'm looking up and I'm thinking, why is it that 3 years ago I could take a hemangiosarcoma, a huge cancer of the spleen, out of a dog's belly? It was literally the size of a basketball, clean the abdomen up, close the abdomen up, dog was fine, never looked back. 3 years later, I'm seeing tumors this size or maybe a little bit bigger that have ruptured, and the dog is dead in 6 months from the same cancer. The biology of the disease changed, and it's like, what is going on? And I couldn't figure it out. So I'm a advocate of home cooking and TCBM, so I started using those to help treat the cancers and trying to convince people to do things to help prevent disease. It still wasn't as effective as I wanted it to be, and I just kept puzzling. Finally, I think about 2 years ago, I read an article by Dr. Michelle Kunzler, who is a veterinarian at Oregon State University, Corvallis. She's a genologist. And so what that means is that she studies reproduction. So it's kind of funny that she's the one that made this discovery. But what she found is that in spayed and neutered pets, their levels of luteinizing hormone, or LH, are 20 to 30 times physiologic levels. What's worse is that tissues that shouldn't have receptors for LH do. And so we're seeing those receptors on the brain, on the kidneys, on the adrenal glands, on the bones, and the joints, and the bone marrow, and the intestines, pretty much everywhere in the body. And so
what is the function of LH?
Luteinizing hormone is in an intact dog, female, male, cat, human, whatever. For females, it helps us make and prepare eggs to be fertilized so that they're ready to receive the sperm, get fertilized, and make a new whatever species you are. In males, it also helps to condition the sperm to be more normal. So really, that should be the only functions that they're exhibiting in the body. And so, spay and neutered pets, it just doesn't happen.
Mhm.
It's unneeded, but yet we have these huge levels. And if it's too sciencey, you just stop me.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. So that's the thing. I mean, basically everywhere we see chronic disease, there are receptors for LH in that tissue. So we've had an astronomical increase in Cushing's disease and Addison's disease. Oh, well, okay, those are autoimmune, but that means that these tissues are conditioned to respond to something.
Right.
And there we go. So there's the answer.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, why do you think in the veterinary community? I mean, we spoke with Dr. Lise Hansen a few months ago, who's based out of the UK, originally from Denmark, and she spoke at length about, at least within the UK, there's more of an acceptance of, um, individuals taking responsibility in managing their intact dogs. I think in the US, there is an issue with overpopulation, but we're not dealing with it in the best way that we can because the result is dogs will suffer from these other ailments that they can't physically take care of themselves because we've now just removed the part of their reproductive system that allows them to build their immunity and heal themselves from some of these issues among the veterinary community. Why do you think there's still such a divide?
I think there's a couple of things going on. And I think in the case of the UK, the SPCA there, the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, was so powerful in the 1800s that dogs had more rights than children did. So, I mean, the tradition there is very strong. And if you had a litter of puppies hit the ground that you couldn't provide for, they would actually track you down and fine you. So there
Mhm.
was a really strong reason to be a responsible pet owner at that point. In the US, I think there's a couple of things going on, right? We've said it so long and so loud, and this is the way that my colleagues are afraid to back away from the dogma because it's hard. And there is not in all of my travels, dogs are out cruising around, off lead on their own personal recognizance, so to speak, and they've learned how to socialize properly. In the US, we're not a very we're not a very social culture. So our dogs haven't really learned very well how to socialize properly.
Mhm.
Dog parks have helped tremendously with that, but there's still the guy that comes with his big beefy dog that's the bully of the dog park. And instead of having a way to, deal with that properly, it's a problem. And so everybody picks up their dogs and goes home when the guy comes with the dog. My
Right.
profession is really having a difficult time moving away from the dogma, so to speak. And it's, I think the other problem is too, is that God bless them because they are overwhelmed and up to here with trying to take care of everything in front of them. Unfortunately, what's happened is that if you ask them a question about something that either they're not sure about or that they've just had it for the day, what you get is a really strong pushback. And you get
Yeah.
that I'm the doctor and I know best response instead of, well, I don't know. Let me look into that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think a lot of people inherently are just afraid to say they don't know, or there might be a better way, but I don't know what it is, and let me go find out, because as you said, there's already a shortage and they're trying to just sort of get people in and out as quickly as possible. What other sort of effects are we seeing from early spay and neuter? Like, what is just so obvious to you when you're treating an animal, or just going outside and being like, well, I know what caused that.
Well, I mean, I think the level of anxiety and phobias is just astronomical. I mean, that is the number one reason for pets to be turned into the SPCAs because the pet parents can't handle it, and they're
Mhm.
not. The responses they're getting from my colleagues are take Prozac, take trazodone, take blah blah, gabapentin, whatever. Just basically sedate the heck out of the dog so that the behavior doesn't happen, and that's a pretty horrible existence. The
Right.
other the other issues that we're seeing 2-year-old dogs look all sweet and young and healthy, and then at 4 they look like they're 12. We're seeing cancers kick up at 5, 6, 7 years of. I mean, it's just insane, absolutely insane. And the problem is that we've gotten to the point where the American Veterinary Cancer Society estimates that 25% of all dogs will have a malignant cancer, and 50% of dogs over the age of 10 will have a malignant cancer. You can't find that in any other species or, frankly, in any other country.
Yep. That's nuts. That's nuts. Those numbers are just wild. And we talked a lot about, especially from Feed Real, advocating for fresh food. And something that came about when I was chatting with Angela Ardolino when we were trying to put this Feed Real Summit together is that you can feed the best diet ever, but you can also sabotage all of the benefits of that through other toxins and some decisions like this to remove naturally reproductive organs and body parts from your dogs that don't allow them to heal themselves. I think it's just something that we're not talking about enough.
I mean, I totally agree. So there are not very many similar examples. So the only one I can come in on the human side, and the only one I can come up with is Turner syndrome in women, where they have a genetic change, and essentially they go on into menopause as early as 36. Most of these women do not live past 50. 45 is pretty common. So, I mean, that's where these things show up pretty quickly. And we can talk about the quality of food, the environmental pollutants that are out there, the oral pesticides that my profession is peddling, and all sorts of other things that are real problems. I mean, we've just got glyphosate in the environment globally now because the US has sprayed so much of it. But there are things that you can do to help work with what you've got. So, for instance, if we know that the liver is involved in getting levels of luteinizing hormone and other hormones and toxins out of the system, your dog is spayed or neutered, you can't put the ovaries back in. So, you've got to work with what you got. And one of the things we can do is really support liver function and give that dog real whole food and not the kibble and not the things that are going to add more toxins to the diet, more advanced glycosylation end products. So that's just critical, is to minimize exposure, support detoxification, support gut health.
Yep. I know a lot of people like to supplement with milk thistle to
Mhm.
support the liver. Is there anything else you recommend adding? And say they're already feeding a fresh food diet. What else could they do?
So milk thistle is awesome. If you know that your dog already has some fairly marked elevations in liver enzymes, liposomal glutathione is the master antioxidant for the liver. It's best delivered by intravenous push, but that's not very accessible for most folks. So there are specific liquid products that are great. And I'm experimenting with another product right now that may help increase access as well. Brassica vegetables are critically important. And so, whether, if your dog's not really tolerating broccoli well, you can do things like broccoli sprouts.
Mhm.
Really, those are extremely high in sulforaphane content, and that's one of the other massive things that will help liver function. So there's that. And then I think the better the gut function is, the less hard the liver has to work. If the microbiome is doing the work of detoxification, we're using enough adequate fiber to help carry garbage out of the system. Those are all super important things.
Yep. Absolutely. I see Donna has a question here that I'm going to bring up in just a second. I do want to invite our audience to drop any questions they have on this topic, early spay and neuter, or any question for Dr. Ruth here in the comments, because we are all about empowering you guys to better serve and help your pets. And we can only do that if you tell us what you want to learn and what you want to know. So please feel free to drop that in the comments. Before I bring up Donna's question, I reached out to you, wow, almost a year ago when we were dealing with some bladder stone issues with my dog Icon, who is an 8-year-old Anatolian Shepherd. And I remember telling you that, you know, he didn't have the gene for it. And so they suspected it was a link between his testosterone production, because he was intact, and the formation of these particular stones. And you really were like, I want you to think about if you really want to go forward with the neuter, and if you decide that's what you want to do, consider a hormone sort of replacement, testosterone replacement therapy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a guy named Dr. David Bieber who has a company called Dogsterone. And what he is doing is training other veterinarians how to use testosterone replacement therapy. Now, the difficulty is testosterone is a controlled substance. And so veterinarians have to have specific health reasons to use this. And mostly they're related to arthritis and frailty. But this is a great option. And what he's doing is he's helping these dogs feel better. They're more mobile, they can get muscle back, all of that good stuff. But the other thing, and I've chatted with him about this, what he's doing is he is shutting off the mechanism of production of luteinizing hormone. And right, so there's something called, if you think about the hypothalamus, and most of the time when I say hypothalamus, you may think of HPA axis, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal glands, and that's really, really critical for understanding various diseases of cortisol production. But the hypothalamus is involved in a lot of other stuff. And so one of the things that it produces is GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening is when the pet is spayed or neutered, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone are not there to feed back to the hypothalamus to say, hey, we're good down here, we got enough. You can shut off the GnRH production. Right, exactly. And so by giving testosterone, or for female dogs that have urinary incontinence, giving them an estrogen compound, we're now shutting that mechanism back off. And so for female dogs with urinary incontinence, the dribbles go away. And actually they feel better. I think they feel more solid in themselves. They look better. Their coats are shinier. They have more muscle. Same thing with the testosterone therapy. That works for both males and females.
Interesting. Kind of a side note, I had a live with Poppy Phillips, who works on a lot of equine holistic healing. And she mentioned that in the state of California, we have an obscene amount of testosterone in our sewage and our humage, our human. And I just, is it the Viagra? Like, well, I don't understand where it's coming from, but I just thought that was really, really odd.
Hey, I am 2 days away from 60, and I'm here to tell you that testosterone replacement therapy is a game changer as we get older. However, there's a lot of bodybuilders out in Cali, and so
That's true.
there's both legal uses to support aging, and then there's the illegal uses for usually for performance.
Sure. Okay, so going back to dogs and cats, is this testosterone replacement therapy available for cats? Do you know?
It gets a little more difficult, but because I am old enough and have been in the profession long enough, I can tell you that we used to use mybolerone for cats, which is an anabolic steroid as well. We used it for cats when FELV and FIV were, FELV is horrible if you've got a kitten. For older cats, they generally can deal with it reasonably well. But we were using these drugs for the frailty induced by these diseases. And again, those diseases, the The biology of the diseases have changed. So it is applicable, but because the FDA looks at testosterone for dogs, this is where we have to kind of work in the paradigm. But there is precedent for that
Got it.
in
And
kitties.
are you seeing the same metabolic diseases and cancers in cats that you're seeing in dogs?
This is the thing that's interesting. Yes, I see that cats are aging so much more quickly than they used to 30 years ago. And but I think that they don't have the same degree of horribleness going on as dogs do. And granted, boatloads of kidney disease, still boatloads of cancer, boatloads of inflammatory bowel disease or syndrome, depending on how many drugs they're on, and other stuff, just quality of life issues. But they, you know, we. So yes, it's there. I don't think it's quite as prevalent, but it is still a massive problem.
Sure. And I think, one difference with domesticated cats is that they're a lot easier to manage being intact than a dog that you've got to go out and walk out in public every day. So, yeah, right? Like it's a little bit easier.
Well, so there is nothing like living with a female cat that is in heat to keep you up all night. And the tomcats, interestingly enough, not so much of a problem. Yes, they can spray, but a lot of that, again, is behavior and training. So, yeah, I think they're a bit easier, but you're right. There's not the public socialization, going out for walks, dog walks, trying to go to daycares, trying to go to boarding facilities.
Hmm.
So that's where it really gets to be a problem for dogs.
Yep. Yep. Agree. How do we support our dogs that are spayed or neutered when we get them? So a lot of people, they weren't there to make this choice, this decision. I think we've been
Right.
talking a lot about this topic for the last few years. So now when you're getting your next dog or cat, you can make a more informed decision. But if you're getting them from a rescue or from the shelter, a lot of times they're already fixed.
Right.
Uh, what other things can we do to support
So
them?
one of the things that I've been using very successfully for years is a product by standard process called Simplex F for females or Simplex M for males. And essentially what that is feeding glandular ovaries, testicles, and a few others, adrenal glands, other supporting glands to help provide the raw materials for that dog's body to work more physiologically appropriately. So, if we think about the process of what happens when we go through menopause or andropause, essentially the organ, the ovaries or the testes, stop producing enough testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. And the adrenal glands now become responsible. They rely on having enough belly fat to be able to pull the materials they need to produce enough levels of those hormones to keep us feeling better.
Mhm.
So the what tends to happen is that if we've got this pet that went into andropause or menopause at 8 weeks, 6 months, a year, their bodies are forever playing catch up. So by supplying those raw materials, I think we can really give them quite a bit of help.
Is that why we find many I can only speak to dogs. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know anything about cats. But is that why we see so many overweight dogs? I find that since we neutered our pup, he is nearly insatiable. Like it's asking for food all the time. And he just never used to be like that. I understand that part of the reproductive organs that regulate hunger and being full have now been removed, but when you say pull from the belly fat to compensate for those loss of hormones, is that why we tend to see those dogs eat a little bit more?
I think part of it is that, like you said, the hormonal balance is out of whack. And so one of the other hormones produced in the HPA axis is cortisol. And so, as the sex hormones start to drop, we can see some rises in cortisol. So, if we think about the side effects of prednisone at large doses, drinking more, peeing more, eating more, gaining weight, we're seeing some little pieces of those with higher levels of cortisol. Does that make sense?
Yeah, interesting. The supplement that you talked about from Standard Process, is that that for glandular support, is that something that we would want to give forever?
Yes. Absolutely,
You can
because
never stop.
yeah, it's not, unless you're actually going to have the ability to replace testosterone or estrogen. And then that's going to help keep things in balance. But even so, it's just part of the balance is like we tend to think of organs in isolation, but
Mhm.
truly everything's working in synergy. So the adrenal glands are just getting pounded constantly. So we talk about adrenal fatigue in people or hypocortisolemia. I think that's what's part of what's happening with our pets, but we just haven't even begun to understand how to address that.
Sure, sure. What was the name of that supplement again from Standard
Right.
Process?
So Simplex F or Simplex M, there are several folks that have straight up connections with Standard Process. I've got one as well. So you can just, you can Google it and order it online without having to work with a practitioner.
Yep. Love Standard Process. They're actually one of the sponsors for the Feed Real Summit.
Really good folks doing good stuff.
Question from Jay. Is it okay? I never spayed my dog, but never had a litter. Is it better
Hmm.
to have her spayed a lot later? Like, I
So
guess the question is, what's the right age?
And that's the magic question, right? So there is something called the Old Gray Muzzle Tour, and I apologize, I forget the veterinarian's name, but basically he's a longevity researcher, and he was using Rottweilers as his model for human longevity. So long story short, he started talking to Rottweiler owners, and he realized that most of the dogs were dying at 8, just period, and they were spayed and neutered. But there was a subset that were 13, 14, 15, 16, which is just astronomically old for a Rottweiler. These
Mm-hmm.
dogs were not spayed or neutered. And so, on the human side, the other thing I can tell you is that if you are a woman and you have an ovarian cyst and they're like, oh, we'll just take them both out. If you allow them to take both of your ovaries, your lifespan has just decreased by 4 years. So, and what they finally figured out is that the ovarian cancer is actually coming from the fallopian tubes, not the ovaries. So the doctors are actually willing to discuss this with you now. But the point is this: the age to take them out is never, unless there's a health problem or another reason to do this. So, for instance, if your dog develops an infection of the uterus, then that may be a time to consider, just because there's other potential problems that could come up with the ovaries being intact.
Sure.
What the researchers' recommendation was to wait until at least they were 5, which roughly parallels the age of menopause or andropause in humans.
Something else that I learned before was that, those hormones help regulate the growth plates with your dogs. And something that I never noticed this before, but essentially, when you remove that hormone, it doesn't tell those bones to stop growing, to close those. And we see a lot of early neutered or spayed dogs who are kind of like lanky, like they've got these long arms and really, odd sized chests. And that to me was just a huge sign that I was like, there's no way that I'm removing those hormones. Like, how can I restrict my dog from adequately regulating how he was supposed to grow? And I think that's another sign that we tend to see very, very common here.
Right. Yeah. And then the other problem is that when they're spayed and neutered, they tend to produce, and we're feeding a conventional diet, which is high carb. They make a lot of body fat, but not a lot of muscle. And so you're right, those growth plates get all wonky, and
Yep.
it creates problems later for sure.
Awesome questions, guys. Make sure to keep them coming. I love all of this. My female dog was spayed at 8 months. Will giving her CBD help with deficiencies or the lack of hormones?
And Kaya, that is an excellent question and really an easy tool that I left out of the repertoire because part of what CBD does is help to create homeostasis within the body. So, yes, absolutely. So, if I really sat down and wrote out a protocol now, it would be real food, simplex FRM, or some sort of glandular product with sex glands and adrenal support, CBD, omega-3 fatty acids, and some sort of a probiotic.
What's your choice of probiotic?
It's actually a human product, a product by Microbiome Labs. They have a dog one called Phytospore, but I like their human product called Megaspore better. And the idea is that these are sporulated probiotics, and so they're sort of in hibernation, and they do not have prebiotics with them. And I think that's really important, especially if there's been any GI issues. But the cool thing is that they are designed to get down into the colon and set up shop and really work more as a scaffolding for the microbiome rather than trying to replace specific strains. So the goal is they'll get in there, make it more hospitable for the good guys that we want to really take off in there.
Sure, sure. No, I'm a huge fan of allowing your pet to build their own microbiome. I think over supplementation is a thing, and a lot of times we're just adding stuff into the bowl because we see somebody else do it. But I'm a huge fan of kind of giving your dog a break and allowing them to develop their own balance. Otherwise, they'll forever be dependent on some of those supplements. But great that we have them around so we can sort of kickstart that process.
Amen. And I agree with you on that. I think if we give something all the time, every day, every night, whatever it is, that your pet is going to develop dependence on it. So taking Sundays off of everything is a great idea. With probiotics, I'll often recommend only giving it once a week. It just depends on what's going on.
Yeah. So are you doing consults to help people sort of navigate things like this, or is everything sort of done through your programs?
Exactly. So I'm no longer doing consultations, but the certified coaches that I've trained are doing consultations. We meet every Monday. We talk about cases they're dealing with. So they've got my ear and I'm able to back them up and support them. But it is just a much more efficient way to help more people.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so tell us about your programs. How does it work?
So it's pretty intense. So it is approved for 40 continuing CE hours for veterinarians and veterinary technicians. So it is definitely not an easy course. It is a 16-week course, and part of what I teach is how to do the business end of it because I think that's really important. And then we talk about functional medicine, traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, and then conventional medicine. And then we start diving into food and how to heal the gut, and then going into each of the organ systems, and then using all three of the medicine systems to understand what's going on, and then offer options for the pet parent. Now, the deal is that to graduate, the coaches have to do 2 recorded consultations that are reviewed with their mentor and that I review, and then that's how we certify them when they can show us that they know the material well enough to help people and make good logical suggestions.
I think that's amazing. Not just empowering pet parents, but now empowering others who want to help. It really is much more effective. I mean, you can only see so many patients a day. And now to have just a team of coaches that are like, okay, I can help people in this region and all over the world. That's just so amazing.
Right on. And that's, as I mentioned when we started, there's only 1,500 members of the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association. And so that's part of what I am so excited about, that crazy week in October, is to be able to talk with them and teach them how to use coaches within their practice so that those folks are available to answer your questions like, oh my God, I gave my dog this and he ended up with diarrhea. What do I do now?
Right.
So, yeah.
No, that's wonderful. How long does it take to complete the course? I know 40 credit hours, that's a lot.
So it is a 16-week course. It's pretty intense, and we do offer an additional month to get all of the homework and the 2 final exam consultations completed. And and that's the other cool thing is that each student has a mentor that they can meet with once a week to get questions answered, like what the heck was she talking about when she said all this crazy stuff about luteinizing hormone. So yeah, it's been so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how do your colleagues who are veterinarians feel about a program like this? I think a lot of um, medical professionals can sometimes feel threatened or have this sort of ego, like, I went to school for this long and studied all of these things, and now you're just training these people and teaching them everything you know. Do you get any pushback?
It's a mixed bag. Yeah, some are like, well, who the heck is she to do this? And others are like, oh my God, we need this desperately. But I think if you look on the human side at health coaching, so this started back in the 80s, and the doctor would come in and tell you, oh, your H1AC is elevated, you're pre-diabetic. Betty's going to come in and tell you what to do. And it went from that to literally a $7 billion industry because on the human side, it's the same set of problems. The doctor is in and out in 6 minutes. And if you have some chronic ongoing problems, that is not enough time to get the help you need.
When you were in veterinary school, how much was nutrition part of your curriculum?
Well, when I finished veterinary school in 1990, Hills gave everybody textbooks and they actually had their names printed on them. I think they finally stopped doing that. They gave everybody, well, they didn't give, but they sold us food at discounted prices. I think that the large animal nutrition course, part of the course, was actually more informative in terms of understanding macro and micronutrients and all of that. And it was just tragical, really tragical.
So what sort of pushed you to go down this path of holistic and integrative practice?
I got sick. So in 2006, I had IBS. I had C. diff for the second time. If you're not familiar with that bacteria, it is not fun to have. And I had fibromyalgia. And what I had seen was my clients coming in and they'd been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and they were being turned into junkies. I mean, literally, they go from the NSAIDs to hydrocodone, and this is pre OxyContin, but whatever else was in the milieu. And it was horrifying. So I knew I did not want that. And I was lucky enough to find a functional medicine doctor in Charleston. I didn't like what he told me because basically I was eating the standard American diet. And he's like, what? Are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so everything that he told me I had to do for my pets, I did it because I didn't want to be a junkie and I didn't want to suffer for the rest of my life. And I got better and I got better. And I thought, why aren't we doing this for dogs and cats? What? And so started studying Chinese medicine at the same time. They were teaching me about home cooking for pets, and it was like, so scary because the AFCO police are going to come get me.
Yeah.
Well, but one of my own dogs developed bacterial endocarditis, which is an infection on the heart valve, and I mean, it's not a good disease. So we went through the conventional stuff. We got her better, and took her down with me to the next acupuncture training class. My professors talked to me and they're like, well, you need to do these points and use these herbs and you need to start cooking for her. This dog would not let me needle her. She was like, ain't happening. Mm-hmm. So she thought the herbs were okay. She thought the home cooking was an outstanding idea. And honest to God, Ruby, I watched as her heart valve lesion went from this big in diameter, about a centimeter, to 3 millimeters, which is about the width of a piece of paper. So she had this at 9. She ended up living to be 13. She still needed some conventional heart meds, and that was kind of where I was at the time. But she really proved to me that I had to start talking to people about real food. So we started making some recipes, and I very shyly started talking to my clients. And then the first pet food recall hit, and literally, I would say 500 or 600 copies of the diet flew out the office, and the results were astonishing. I
Wow.
mean, Doc, he stopped itching. Doc, he doesn't have diarrhea anymore. Doc, she won't cook for me, but she'll cook for the dog.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah, it was crazy. Yeah.
I bet. And no turning back from that. Real food, food heals. Food is medicine. We've known it
Amen.
for a long, long time. And I'm just so happy to see that so many of us are getting back to that.
Right on.
It looks like we have a few graduates of your program who are very, very happy. Such a great course, well worth it, truly incredible, and someone that's looking forward to taking it. Where can they find this program?
You can jump over to drruthroberts.com. And actually, if you better yet, go to holisticpethealthcoach.com. There's a page there where there's a video where you can learn more about the program, read about it, understand what's involved, and then apply. So, yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, for those of you who have your tickets to the Feed Real Summit, you are going to get to meet Dr. Ruth in the flesh and talk to her in person about her program, as well as sit in on this wonderful lecture that she has planned to really help empower you guys to take better care of your pets without running to the vet every single day. And I'm so, so impressed by you. I probably am more impressed by your traveling lifestyle. Are you stopping anywhere between Montenegro and San Diego? Oh, you're going to Arizona. That's right.
Going to Arizona for a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, that's going to be awesome too. Talking to a group of holistically minded human healthcare practitioners. So that's going to be
Yeah.
fantastic.
And I just love that you're doing both because it's not all that different. I meet a lot of people, especially in San Diego, it's the mecca for martial arts. As you said, a lot of performance sort of bodybuilders, especially in Southern California. And mentally they get it, abs are made in the kitchen, and I've got to eat clean, and I'm not going to sabotage my workout with a dirty diet. But somehow it just doesn't translate to their pets, and it's just sort of mind-blowing. But what you're doing is amazing, just to be able to like make that parallel and connection, and hopefully the people that are going to be at that conference who are also pet owners might think twice about what they're feeding their animals and how they're caring for them.
Right on. And Ruby, I am so grateful that you're putting this event together. I mean, your education process is amazing, but wow, what you guys have done to pull this off is just amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you guys all for tuning in. Make sure to grab your tickets for the summit. It's this October 14th in San Diego. We can't wait to see you there. And thank you again, Dr. Ruth, for joining me live.
With pleasure.
Talk to you guys soon. Bye.